Your calendar says you're free at 4, my assistant whispered. But HR just added a coffee chat with Ethan over it. That's how it started. Not with a bang, just a hijacked calendar invite and a pit in my stomach the size of a frozen burrito. The kind they serve in airport lounges. The kind that feels like polite poison. Ethan hadn't even been introduced yet. But his name was already tagging meetings I hadn't scheduled, and somehow the whole company was buzzing about him like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. If Steve Jobs wore all birds, and said the word synergy like it was foreplay. By 4:02, he glided into the seventh floor war room with that VC smirk and a Patagonia vest that screamed, "My dad's lawyer got me out of a jet ski DUI once." His handshake was firm in that weirdly aggressive way, like he was trying to alpha me into submission, which was adorable. I'd survived 3 acquisitions, 1 public listing, and a hostile buyout from a fintech cult. This boy didn't scare me. Now, before I tell you how this golden boy tried to erase me from my own company, only to end up choking on shareholder clauses he didn't know existed, do me one small favor. If you're enjoying where this is going, hit the subscribe button and toss us a like. It's free, and I promise we'll use the validation to fuel petty revenge and spite-fueled storytelling for years to come. It really helps the team. Now, back to the fallout. Ethan started by asking about our innovation bottlenecks. I told him the bottleneck was the 12-week delay from legal, not my team. He smiled like I'd told him a cute joke. Then he pulled up my project dashboard on the big screen without asking. That's when I noticed the data was a week out of date, and my name was scrubbed from the project leads. I just merged all legacy streams under Ops 2.0, he said. Streamlining, legacy. I've been called worse, but something about that word makes your blood thump in your ears, like you're a couch someone's planning to leave on the curb. By Friday, the engineer I'd been mentoring, Nina, bright kid, brilliant with edge systems, got reassigned for exposure. Exposure to what? Ethan's vision boards and banana graphs. Her desk was moved to the other wing. HR said it was part of the new seating logic. The following Monday, my budget notification pinged, reduced by 37%. No heads up, no memo, just temporary reallocation pending fiscal refocus. Meanwhile, Ethan was strutting around like a human TED talk. All buzzwords and blazer sleeves rolled to the elbows like he was about to paint a startup mural. Every weekly exec huddle became a soliloquy about velocity and market responsiveness. But what struck me most wasn't the language. It was the eye contact, or lack of it. He never looked at me directly. Not once. Not during planning. Not during metrics review. Not even when I handed him the revised launch schedule that had saved us $220K in contractor overhead. He just nodded and said, "Love this direction," then sent a follow-up email without copying me. Instead, he looped in a junior analyst from finance. Cute. I didn't yell, didn't storm into anyone's office. I just started digging, pulled out my old stock folders, cross-referenced series allocations, highlighted clauses in the dusty shareholder charter nobody reads past onboarding. I even reached out to Mike, the former CFO, under the pretense of a catch-up. He still owed me for covering his ass during the 2019 audit fiasco. And as I watched Ethan rewrite the org chart like it was a dorm whiteboard, I smiled to myself. Because if this smug little buzzword factory thought he could erase me without a fight, he had no idea what I'd buried under this company's foundation. And he just stepped on it. The email subject line read, "Quick FYI, budget smoothing." That's the corporate version of "we're not robbing you, we're just holding your wallet for a while." Inside, 3 sentences. 1. Temporary reallocation of division funds. 2. Shouldn't impact mission-critical ops. 3. Appreciate your flexibility. They sliced 42% from my operating budget like it was a damn coupon. No discussion, no call, not even a flagged meeting on the calendar. Just poof, half my runway gone. I didn't scream, didn't forward it with angry red circles. I made a new folder called Ethan Moves, dragged the email in and went back to my coffee. Burnt office roast, just the way I like it, dark and bitter, like my sense of optimism. By noon, the next blow landed. My assistant Tammy, who'd been with me for 6 years and could predict project bottlenecks like a storm whisperer, knocked on my door with that guilty I've been HR'd look. "They're moving me to Ethan's group," she said, trying to smile. "Shadowing comms workflows." I didn't blink. "That's great exposure," I lied. "You'll do amazing." Tammy didn't deserve to be collateral damage, and I wasn't going to make it worse by making a scene. But the moment she left, I locked my door, opened my bottom drawer, and pulled out the thick binder labeled Cap Table Original. It still smelled like ink and paper cuts. The next day, a major client review I'd been prepping for was suddenly rescheduled due to bandwidth. I found out because the junior rep copied me after the meeting had already happened. When I asked Ethan's chief of staff what had changed, she smiled and said, "Oh, I think Ethan looped in some of his old contacts to streamline things. Didn't want to overwhelm the client." Right, because nothing says streamlined like excluding the woman who built the product from the ground up. Then came the kicker. Tuesday, 9:47 a.m. A calendar invite pops up, design review shadow lead kickoff. I stared at it like it had insulted my mother. The location was my own team's war room. The organizer, Ethan. Next to lead, TBD, there it was in fine print, shadow lead. Jenna, fresh out of grad school, 2 months into a contract. Smart but green as baby spinach. I walked down the hall, ducked into the glass conference room, and found her already setting up slides. She jumped when she saw me. "Oh, hi, HR said you'd be joining remotely?" My smile could have sliced drywall. Did they now? Back in my office, I forwarded the invite to HR with a single line. "Can you clarify the reporting structure for the shadow lead?" My name is still on the team charter. No reply, just silence, like corporate had swallowed its own tongue. At this point, the temperature in my veins dropped 10 degrees. This wasn't just a restructuring. This was a targeted freezing. And I'd been through enough purges to recognize the pattern. Disempower, isolate, discredit. But here's the thing. You can't discredit someone who keeps receipts. I dusted off the original shareholder bylaws. Scanned clause 6.1 again. Verified which classes of shares held veto rights. Cross-referenced the board list, then pulled an old Christmas card from Mike, the former CFO, and called the number scribbled in chicken scratch on the back. He picked up on the second ring. "You calling in a favor?" "Not yet," I said. "But don't delete your calendar." That night, I logged into the internal org chart system. Ethan had already started renaming departments. Legacy Ops was now listed under obsolete functions. That was my team. He even changed the icon to a gray hourglass. Subtle. But he wasn't subtle enough to notice the one thing he hadn't touched, the voting records. Most folks don't realize this, but if you never surrender your original series a certificate, and if the bylaws never formally void them, you don't just hold history, you hold leverage. And I had both, so I sat back. I let the emails pile. I let the slight digs accumulate. I let him write his little fiefdom in jargon and flair. Because sometimes the best way to destroy a man like Ethan is to let him keep talking. The worst part wasn't the words, it was the smile. That weak, patronizing grin Ethan gave me as he gestured toward the only chair in his glass office like I was a stray dog he didn't want to get wet in the rain. I didn't sit. He did. Of course he did. He folded his hands and launched into his monologue with the soft sincerity of a man who'd just discovered HR-approved empathy on LinkedIn. "Patricia, I know this isn't easy, but we're shifting our focus. Realigning toward more agile verticals. Your position is being eliminated." He said it like he was breaking up with a ficus, like I was some old plant that stopped matching the decor. I stared at him for a long second. No blinking, no twitch, just silence. He kept going, talking about pivots and innovation streams and forward movement without friction. I glanced around his office. No photos, no books, no personal history. Just a sleek monitor, an overpriced standing desk, and a succulent someone else watered. There was no severance document on the table. No formal offboarding plan. Just a brochure-looking exit packet and a pre-signed goodbye letter addressed to whom it may concern. So I nodded once and said, "Please put that in writing." That wiped the smirk off his face. For a blink, the real Ethan peeked out. Tight jaw, cold eyes, someone not used to being asked to back his bullshit. He muttered something about HR follow-up and legal approval, and I left without shaking his hand. The moment the door shut behind me, I didn't cry, didn't breathe heavy. I just walked to my office, unplugged my laptop, boxed up 2 framed photos, and left behind the nameplate. Let him feel like he won. Back home, I kicked off my heels, changed into sweatpants, and unlocked the fireproof safe behind my bookcase. Inside, under an old folder of house deeds and my ex-husband's insurance disaster, sat the manila envelope I hadn't opened in 8 years. I pulled it out, blew off the dust, opened the flap. There it was, Series of Preferred Stock Certificate #006, issued to Patricia M. Dalton. Original signatures, corporate seal. Date, March 17, 2014. I remember that day like muscle memory. The company was barely out of its garage phase. Our server room was a glorified closet with a fan. I'd negotiated a bonus conversion when we couldn't hit cash flow. Everyone laughed at me for taking equity instead of money. Well, they weren't laughing now. I turned the page over and reread the clause handwritten by our first lawyer, the kind who used to be a bartender, and still wrote like he was pouring whiskey into contracts. Ownership is non-transferable unless voluntarily surrendered or voided via board resolution. I'd never surrendered it, and no resolution had ever been passed. I would know I helped write the damn charters. I ran a quick search in my digital archives. Found the 2017 restructuring email thread. Found the 2020 funding round where new shares were issued, but not mine. I was legacy paper, a ghost on the ledger. But ghosts have claws, too. In that moment, sitting cross-legged in my living room with a glass of cheap Syrah and my cat purring against my leg, something inside me clicked into place. This wasn't a goodbye, it was a re-entry. Let Ethan think he'd erased me. Let him keep smiling through his presentations and gutting teams like a butcher in a yoga class. I wasn't going to stop him. Not yet, because the more rope he fed himself, the better it'd look when the floor dropped out. I poured another glass, picked up the certificate, and whispered to no one, "Let's see how innovative you are with your pants around your ankles, Ethan." Mike picked the diner. Of course he did. The kind with cracked red booths, lukewarm coffee, and a waitress named Barb who called everyone Han. Nostalgia was his currency now that he was doing good in nonprofit finance, slinging budget models for urban literacy programs. He traded Armani for corduroy and corporate policy for handwritten grant applications. But he still had the same twitch in his left eyelid when he was about to say something important. Christ, Trish, he muttered, flipping through the photocopy I'd handed him. You still have the original, cert? I sipped my watery coffee. Untouched. He gave a low whistle like I'd just pulled a live grenade out of my purse. Then you never relinquished voting rights, not unless someone passed a resolution and they'd have needed your signature. Which, I'm guessing, never happened. I slid a folded napkin across the table. On it, Clause 6.1 from the original shareholder bylaws, his own handwriting. The one he scrawled the night we rewrote the charter in a tequila-fueled panic before the Series B round. He sat back, eyes flicking toward the window. You do realize Ethan doesn't know any of this? Not yet, I said. But he's about to find out what legacy actually means. Mike smirked. You always did do your best work with a knife in your purse. We split the check. He promised to dig up a copy of the charter from his old drives just to be legally thorough. I knew he was doing it partly out of guilt, partly because he hated Ethan's kind, glossy boys who thought PowerPoints could replace due diligence. Next stop, Alan Brewster. Alan had once been the golden goose of the board, respected CEO turned investor with a soft spot for social equity initiatives and the world's most unfortunate combover. He also happened to owe me a favor. In 2016, I'd quietly cleaned up a data leak tied to one of his pet projects, shielding him from a PR explosion that could have turned his career into ash. He never forgot it. I found him in Arizona, golfing poorly. He looked exactly the same, just pinker and slower. We FaceTimed. He was thrilled to hear from me, called me kiddo, and asked if I still drank gin like it was water. I told him I'd switched to bourbon and backstabbing. When I explained what Ethan had done, removing me, realigning departments, dancing dangerously close to breaching fiduciary protections, Alan's face darkened. I'll be at the meeting, he said. Proxy's fine. Send the papers. And Patricia? Yes, burn him slow. Meanwhile, Ethan had shifted into full messiah mode. He'd started releasing weekly vision memos to staff, dripping with motivational sludge like, the future belongs to the fast, and discomfort is a sign of growth. One even had a graph comparing agile mindsets to rocket ships. I printed that one and stuck it on my fridge next to a picture of my niece's macaroni volcano. Investors were watching. I could see the LinkedIn comments, VCs and angel funds chiming in with likes and polite applause. Ethan was grooming them for his next play, probably trying to sell a second raise, a rebrand, maybe even an acquisition pitch with him as the genius COO who turned around a stagnant ops system. Cute. He didn't know I was already speaking with legal. Didn't know I'd verified my proxy rights with Alan's old board login. Didn't know I'd found the old investor newsletter from 2015 confirming my voting class status, and still active, as no conversion event had ever been triggered. And most importantly, he didn't know I'd ordered 3 certified copies of my stock cert from the original registrar. One for the board table, one for legal, and one for my handbag, right next to my travel-sized Tylenol and pepper spray. By the end of that week, the HR lead sent me a cold little email confirming my final exit process would be complete after the upcoming board session. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. I didn't reply. Instead, I set a calendar reminder for 10:45 a.m. the morning of the meeting, and under the subject line, I typed, begin. The deck leaked on a Tuesday. Not to the press, not to investors. To us, the nobodies, the lifers, the folks who remembered when this place still ran on duct tape and late-night pizza. It showed up in the form of an all-company oops upload to the shared drive. Restructure 2025 V final PPTX at first glance. It was pure Ethan, overdesigned, underthought, full of startup mad libs. Operational synergies, culture 2.0, value unlock zones. Then I hit slide 12. Phase 2, eliminate redundancies / consolidate equity overhang beneath it. Pie chart colored like a circus wound, a chunk labeled low-yield equity positions legacy ops, and there it was. A quiet kill shot dressed in Helvetica New, my era, my people. A generation of sweat equity reduced to a liability line on a PowerPoint slide. Within hours, Slack lit up like Christmas. No one said my name, they didn't have to. Folks who hadn't spoken to me in months dropped emojis. One sent a silent tumbler glass. Another, just he really thinks no one's watching? Meanwhile, Ethan was on a LinkedIn tier. Posted a smug selfie from his treadmill desk with the caption, sometimes the hard conversations are the ones that lead to true innovation. Excited to lead our next chapter. I didn't like it, I didn't comment. I just saved it to a folder labeled Exhibits. That same afternoon, HR pinged me like nothing had happened. Hi Patricia, just confirming your last day is Friday. I'll need your laptop, badge, ID fob, and any company-owned materials. Thanks for your partnership. Like I'd been a wedding caterer, not the woman who wrote the first product roadmap on the back of a Panera napkin. I boxed it all up that night. Every cord, dongle, badge, and branded pen. I even tossed in the ergonomic mouse they got me after my wrist surgery. But there was one thing I did not include. That original series, a certificate, still in my safe, still crisp, still sealed, still mine. Funny thing about company property, they only ask for the stuff they can catalog. Friday came, no farewell party, no email thread, a couple quiet nods in the hallway. Someone from facilities gave me an awkward thumbs up as I handed in my security badge. I walked out with my head high and my back straight, not because I wasn't angry. I was, but because I needed Ethan to believe I was finished. The thing about predators like him is they need to smell your fear to feel powerful. But if you walk out like you've already moved on, that's when their tail starts to twitch. As I left the building, I saw the founder in the corner cafe, stirring what looked like a decaf latte. He saw me, raised his cup. I nodded once. He didn't smile. He looked tired. I took that as a sign. Back home, I opened my laptop, and started organizing. I cross-referenced voting records with the meeting agenda. I prepped talking points. I highlighted the clause Ethan had clearly never read. 6.1 Shareholder motion overrides board motion in event of material equity. Dispute the fact that it was still in the charter. A little miracle, or maybe just corporate laziness. Either way, it was going to be my knife. I sent Alan the proxy paperwork. BCC'd Mike with the clause citation and backup documents. Then I wrote one last email to legal. Short, sweet, unignorable. Please confirm whether shareholder voting rights per section 6.1 are active in the upcoming board session. I retain original preferred stock certificate #006 issued March 17, 2014. Will be attending as observer unless notified otherwise. I hit send, and then I waited, not like prey, like a spider, coiled, silent, watching the web. The boardroom smelled like money and exhaustion. The kind of sterile wood-paneled room where time moves like molasses, and people measure power in eye contact and how slowly they sip their water. I walked in exactly 2 minutes early, not late enough to seem flustered, not early enough to look desperate. I took the seat farthest from the screen, no nameplate, no title, just me. The founder nodded at me, barely. Ethan didn't even glance my way. He was too busy air-checking his tie in the reflection of the window. He opened strong, of course. That signature Ethan flair, sleeves rolled, blazer draped on the chair behind him like a backup dancer, posture perfect, voice warmed up like he was auditioning for Shark Tank. Thank you all for being here. I know these conversations are tough, he said with faux gravity, but necessary. Our goal is long-term viability, not short-term sentiment. Translation, I'm here to gut the old guard and sell the carcass to the highest bidder. He clicked into his deck. Same one that leaked earlier, except this version had been polished within an inch of its life. Graphs had gradient shading now. The legacy ops pie slice was gone, replaced with a phrase that made me audibly exhale, reinvestment from sunsetting functions. Sunsetting, like he was putting my era to bed with a lullaby. The founder stayed quiet. His face was pale and blank, one elbow on the table, fingers tapping silently. I watched him more than I watched Ethan. The tapping stopped every time Ethan said innovation. By slide 8, Ethan had the room nodding. The CFO gave an approving grunt at the projected 20% EBITDA boost. One of the newer board members leaned back and murmured, "It's a bold move, but the timing's right." He saved the best for last. "Let's move forward," Ethan said smoothly, like he'd already won. "We'll call for a board vote to approve this restructuring plan, effective Q2. He tapped his tablet. Motions prepared, legal has the language. I heard a few papers shuffle, someone coughed, and for a moment it felt done. Like the train had already left the station and I was just the old conductor waving from the tracks, but I wasn't waving. I was waiting. I looked around the room, studying faces. Some intrigued, some resigned, most just tired. That's what Ethan had been counting on, fatigue. Wear them down with jargon, throw a few shiny metrics on a graph, and ride the wave of boardroom apathy. And maybe, just maybe, I would have let him win. If he hadn't tried to erase me like I was a typo in an old report. But I wasn't a typo. I was the line of code that still held root access. As the motion form was passed down the table, I adjusted my chair, just slightly, enough to creak, subtle. It made Ethan flinch. His hand stopped mid-gesture. He finally looked at me, first time that morning, like he was just now realizing I was in the room, and I smiled, not wide, not warm, just enough to show I still had all my teeth. The vote hadn't started yet, but the countdown had. He just didn't know which direction the clock was ticking. The silence in that room was surgical, precise, sterile, humming with the buzz of fluorescent ambition. Motion was on the table. Hands were twitching. People were seconds from committing to a decision they didn't fully understand, not because they believed in it, but because inertia is louder than reason when you've had 3 cups of coffee and a calendar packed with next steps. Ethan glanced toward legal, gave a nod like a maitre d' signaling the souffle was ready. That's when I moved. I cleared my throat, soft but deliberate, not a cough, not accidental. A warning shot. Before we proceed, I said calmly, I'd like to request a shareholder vote. 7 words. That's all it took to jam the gears of Ethan's carefully rehearsed theater. Chairs shifted. The general counsel paused mid-sip. The founder, who'd been staring at his nails like they held the meaning of life, finally looked up. Ethan blinked. Once, twice. Then came the chuckle, that condescending little laugh men like him keep holstered for women they think are bluffing. Patricia, he said slowly, you don't have the voting block. His voice was gentle, like he was explaining bedtime economics to a toddler. I didn't answer right away, just reached into my bag, pulled out the crisp, sealed manila envelope, and slid it across the polished oak table. It made a soft shhhh sound as it moved, like a fuse being lit. It stopped directly in front of the founder. He hesitated, then opened it. The general counsel leaned forward. His eyebrows lifted half an inch. That was the first crack. I spoke evenly. Series of preferred certificate #006. Issued March 17, 2014. Never surrendered, never voided, still active per Charter Clause 6.1. The room tightened, air shifted. You could hear pens stop scratching. Ethan's lips parted, but nothing came out. His face didn't move, but I saw the twitch in his temple, vein just under the skin that hadn't twitched once during his entire presentation. Is this verified? The CFO asked. The general counsel was already flipping through the papers. His voice was slower now, more careful. This is authentic, original ink, registrar stamp, wet signatures. It was never converted to common or voided in any corporate event. Ethan leaned in, trying to regain ground. She still doesn't hold enough to override the board. Maybe not. I replied, but I do hold enough to delay this vote under Section 6.1 until the shareholder group can be convened and informed. The founder tilted his head. She's within her rights. And just like that, the heat left Ethan's face. His tan drained 3 shades paler. A pause bloomed, the kind that swells before a rupture. I pulled out one more document, Alan's signed proxy form. I laid it gently beside the certificate like a priest placing communion. I'd like the record to show that shareholder Alan Brewster, holding 3.2% equity voting interest, has submitted his proxy in support of my motion to suspend. The counsel blinked. That gives her enough to halt proceedings for review under shareholder dispute protocol. Another silence, but this one was heavier, awkward, guilt-ridden, the kind that comes when people realize they might have just applauded a hanging and the wrong neck got the rope. Ethan stood frozen. I could see him calculating, scrambling behind his eyes, looking for some obscure clause to save him. But there wasn't one, because I wrote the original draft of the bylaws. I had proofed them, amended them, buried little thorns in plain sight that only someone who'd actually built this place from the inside would remember. And now, like a ghost in the wiring, I'd re-emerged. The tide didn't just turn. It yanked the ground out from under him. The board wasn't looking at Ethan anymore. They were looking at me. The general counsel adjusted his glasses with a slow, deliberate motion, like he already knew what he was about to say was going to detonate the room and wanted to savor the silence just one more second. She still holds her original series of preferred shares, he said flatly. Her voting rights were never diluted. You could feel the temperature shift. A visible exhale from the CFO. A sharp glance from the woman 2 seats down who'd been nodding along with Ethan's deck like a bobblehead. The founder leaned forward, squinting. She's the tiebreaker? The counsel didn't answer. He didn't have to. I folded my hands in front of me and looked directly at Ethan. He hadn't blinked in 30 seconds. The muscles around his mouth were tight, like he was chewing the inside of his cheek to keep from exploding. I motion, I said calmly, that we suspend this vote until the full shareholder group can review the implications under Clause 6.1 of the Charter. Legal glanced at the founder. He gave a slow nod, the kind that said, proceed, very carefully. Ethan tried to interrupt. This is an ambush. She's exploiting an administrative oversight. The board, I cut in, can reconvene after the shareholder group is fully briefed. Until then, any vote on a structural realignment that impacts legacy equity holders constitutes a violation of governance protocol. I slid a second document across the table. The printed charter, original version, annotated in my handwriting. The founder picked it up and stared at it like he was reading a ghost story. You amended this, proofread it, I said. Your former CFO added the clause. I just didn't forget it existed. Someone let out a laugh. It was short and nervous. Like the room was only just now realizing Ethan might have built his whole castle on sand. Your proposal, I continued, now addressing the room, targets sunsetting roles and low-yield equity classes. My certificate is neither. It is original issue, voting preferred stock, which means any reallocation of power that touches my class must come through me. Ethan was standing now, pacing behind his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he could erase this moment with friction alone. This is obstruction, he muttered. It's governance, I replied. You'd know that if you'd read the bylaws instead of just running a spell check on your LinkedIn post. The general counsel cleared his throat. We'll need to suspend proceedings for legal review. A shareholder convening must be scheduled within 7 business days. Until then, no action on the restructuring can be taken. Silence, cold and absolute. Ethan looked at the founder like a drowning man reaching for a rope. You're going to let this stand? The founder didn't answer right away. He just stared at the annotated charter in his hands. Then, without looking up, he said, it's standing. I leaned back slightly, not smug, just precise, measured, like a scalpel after the incision. Ethan sat down heavily, his hands clenched in his lap, knuckles white. His confidence didn't just break, it shattered. loudly, in front of everyone, and I hadn't raised my voice once. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for the following morning, 8 o'clock sharp, virtual and in-person hybrid per protocol. Legal sent the notice overnight, along with a memo confirming that preferred certificate #006 was active, binding, and qualifies for procedural intervention under Section 6.1 of the Corporate Charter. I printed it, framed it, left it on my kitchen counter like art. By the time I walked into the building again, guest badge clipped to my blazer, hair tied back like I was heading to war instead of brunch, Ethan had already been on 3 calls with investors, 2 damage control sessions with the founder, and 1 emergency strategy huddle with legal. None of it helped. He tried to flood the system with charm, sent out a staff-wide email titled Clarifying the Path Forward with a sun emoji and 3 quotes from Brené Brown. I watched it get forwarded to me 5 separate times with the subject line, "Is this real life?" At 8:01 a.m., the meeting began. The founder opened with a flat, "Let's address the motion first." Ethan's jaw was tight. He opened with a half apology, tried to spin the restructure as a passionately premature draft, blamed miscommunication between governance and innovation silos. I let him go on for exactly 5 minutes. Then I raised my hand. This wasn't miscommunication. It was a deliberate power grab that violated governance bylaws, disenfranchised key equity holders, and placed this company at reputational and operational risk. I could see the blood drain from his neck. The motion to suspend the restructuring passed without a single dissent. Proxy with Allen sealed it. Then the room turned, slowly, deliberately. The CFO spoke first. What else has Ethan pushed through without proper review? Then legal. Did any of these departmental eliminations come with fiduciary disclosures? Then the founder himself. I'd like a full audit of procedural compliance for all operational changes enacted in the last 90 days. And finally, someone at the far end of the table, Quiet Jr., I didn't catch her name, raised her hand and asked, "What's the process for initiating a review of the COO's conduct under Clause 4.3? Clause 4.3. Performance review pending shareholder motion." Ethan looked like he'd been slapped with a tax bill. Legal confirmed it was valid. The motion was filed right then and there. The founder seconded it. Ethan didn't speak again. He stared at the table like it was dissolving under him. By 8:47 a.m., it was no longer in control of the meeting, or the company, or the narrative, and I hadn't needed to yell, posture, or break a single sweat gland. I stood, gathered my folder, and turned to leave. The room was still buzzing, papers shuffling, legal pads scratching, power rearranging itself like furniture in an earthquake. The founder caught up to me in the hallway. "Patricia," he said, soft, "can I walk you out?" I paused. "Let him." We said nothing until the elevator dinged. Just before the doors closed, he looked at me and asked quietly, "Would you ever consider coming back? Maybe in an advisory capacity?" I tilted my head, gave the faintest smile. "I'll consider it," I said, "after I see how you handle the audit." The doors slid shut, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt the floor move beneath me on my terms. Not because I'd survived the storm, but because I was the one who laid the bricks before it hit. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.